Please enjoy to the story one last month completed. Chapter 1. Sydney's POV. Adrian, stop! She cries, giggling in delight. He hovers over her, his fingers still tickling her sides. And what will I get if I do? He smirks, leaning closer to her face. As he closes into her lips, she wakes up. Sydney Taylor squints over at the left side of the bed. Her hands blindly feel around the other side, searching for someone. Sydney's heart drops in disappointment as she realizes, yet again, her husband has yet to come home to her. She wills her tears back, trying hard not to cry. Adrian, her husband, had yet to come home from his alleged company party, although she knew that meant something else. She wasn't an overly attached wife, but this wasn't the first time. It had been months since all of Adrian's affairs had started. The honeymoon phase of their marriage had ended 1.5 years ago. She trusted him, however. Adrian was her husband. She had to trust him. They had made vows to cherish and love one another, through sickness and health, no matter what. A painful cough shook her body as she rushed to the bathroom, blood spilling out of her mouth. She stayed hunched over the toilet as more and more coughs shook her, one by one, over and over. Sydney gets up, wiping her mouth with a tissue, flushing the toilet shortly after. As Sydney hears the front door of their home creak open slowly, she hurries to the bed, flipping her body to face the window opposite from the door. This had become familiar to her, the door always creaking open at an unreasonable hour in the morning. He would come home, the smell of his familiar cologne mixed with another unfamiliar perfume. Adrian would climb into bed with her, his back facing her, still wearing his clothes from the night before, only to get up hours later and leave to sleep in the guest room. Sydney could see the reflection of the door in the window she was facing. She saw the door open smoothly, and soon after Adrian's reflection appeared too. He approached the bed slowly, as if approaching a dangerous animal. She could feel his eyes on her. As he was about to climb in, Sydney could see him hesitating. Adrian slowly, quietly left the room, glancing once back at her. Her tears threatened to spill out as she clutched the bed sheets, another painful cough racking throughout her body. Chapter 2. Sydney's POV. Sydney wakes up the next morning to a still perfectly made bed and a note lying on the small drawer next to her. Note, their bed. Her fingers shake as she picks up the note, her heart feeling heavy because she knows what it's going to say. "We need to talk till the Adrian." Her heart breaks, slowly, but surely in half, because damn it, she knows what they're going to talk about. Tears fall steadily from her face, smearing the black ink on the pristine white paper. She wipes them from her face, assuring herself it would be about some trivial things, like the bills for the house, or the cars. But she knew better. That night, she delays the ride home from work, because she's dreading what's to come. Sydney curses herself internally. Why does she have to love him still? As she drives home from work, she cries. She cried for her marriage, her husband, and most of all, the love she once had. "Where do you think we'll be in the future, Adrian?" Sydney asked softly, looking up at her boyfriend with love and adoration in her eyes. "I don't know, Sydney, but I know I'll be with you forever," Adrian says, kissing her softly. They sit in silence for a few seconds, until Adrian's voice breaks the silence. "Marry me." Sydney looks up in shock and gasps. Her blue eyes fill with tears as she takes in the sight before her. Adrian is kneeling on one knee before her, holding a gorgeous rose gold engagement ring in front of her. He's grinning that adorable grin he does, except you can tell he's nervous. Yes, 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 of course. She flings her arms around him and she's smiling so hard she thinks her face is going to break and her makeup is running with the tears that are spilling from her eyes. Sydney pulls back and looks at the man before her. This is a man she has seen grow up, that she has known practically her whole life. I love you so much, Adrian Taylor. I love you even more, Sydney Anderson. Sydney smiles a sad smile as she remembers how her and Adrian used to be. They were so in love. They got married right after graduating from college, inviting family and friends from all over. Everyone called them the fairytale couple. She laughed bitterly. They wouldn't ever dare say that if they saw them now. As she chopping the onions for dinner, she hears keys jingling in the lock and shortly after, footsteps. Adrian. Is that you? She calls. Adrian Taylor steps into the kitchen, his face grim. Who else would it be? He asks in a sort of rough manner. Without letting her answer, he stomps out of the kitchen, dropping his briefcase next to the couch on the way out. Soon after, Sydney hears the shower running. Another bout of coughs takes control of her as she grips the marble countertop to keep herself standing as she coughs over and over again into her sleeve. Chapter 3. Sydney's POV. Dinner passes silently, as Sydney tries making small conversation, but Adrian isn't in the mood for it. Sydney, he finally starts as she starts to clear away the dishes. There's something I need to tell you. She stays silent, waiting for him to go on, her heart already breaking because she knows what he's going to say. Adrian forges on. I've been seeing another woman, Cassidy. Sydney almost cries at that news, but she isn't surprised. She knew that already. That woman had shown up at her home while her husband was at a party, asking for him. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and we're planning on getting married. At this, her heart cracks into pieces, slowly dropping out of her chest. Sydney feels each word stab into her, one by one. Listen, Sydney, I have the divorce papers and you can sign them tomorrow. A moment of silence sits between them, neither person knowing what to say. Sydney, you and I have fallen out of love. We've been together for 8 years, and nothing is the same anymore. I'm not trying to hurt you, or be mean. I just don't love you anymore. So, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. He turns to leave. Before you go, I have one last request. She speaks up for the first time, her voice wavering. Adrian turns to look at her, his left eyebrow raised. Be with me for one more month. She begs him, pushing her chairs back. One last month. Pretend everything is normal, like nothing else has happened. Please? He thinks about it. Cassidy wouldn't mind, would she? It would only be 1 month. Fine. Chapter 4. Sydney's POV. The first week wasn't different, besides the fact they had dinner together every night. Sydney tried making conversation, but Adrian still acted indifferent and cold. After dinner, they would go to bed, still sleeping in separate rooms. Every night, before bed, he would make a phone call to Cassidy, saying things he used to say to her. Good night, babe. I love you. Her heart stung, knowing their relationship had once been like that, full of love and laughter. It was the second week where things began changing. Adrian would talk about his day at work with her doing same, but leaving out the doctor's appointments. On the Thursday of the third week, he told her that morning, "Don't make dinner. We're going out." He grinned impishly at her. Sydney felt her heart swell at the attention and care he was giving to her. At that moment, she was reminded of the reason why exactly she loved him. After dinner, he brought her out to the park, a place the two of them had dearly loved when they were in college. As they walked, Sydney couldn't help but remember how they used to be, so in love. She wished they could have been like that forever, but life was cruel. Suddenly, just as they reached the car, she bent over, spasms shaking her body as she coughed. Adrian shook his jacket off, draping it over her shoulders. His eyebrows furrowed in concern. "Are you sick?" She laughed bitterly. He didn't even know how sick she was. Nonetheless, she shook her head. "No, it must be the cold getting to me." She managed a small smile, her dimples that Adrian had always admired, faintly showing. "I'm fine." Chapter 5. Sydney's POV. That night, they slept in the same bed. Sydney felt her heart swell when he crept into their room with her that night, but refused to hope, knowing she would be hurt even more in the end. As she lay there, Adrian on his separate side of the bed, she could feel a dull pain, clawing at the inside of her chest. She pressed her palm down, sighing at the small bit of relief it gave her. She got up, silently creeping out of bed to find her medication. Suddenly, she burst out coughing, bending over by the waist, trying to stop it. Adrian stirred awake and focused on his soon-to-be ex-wife, bent over, looking as if she were about to die. She noticed Adrian stir awake and watch her. He threw the covers off of himself and hurried over to her. Her heart breaks again, knowing that this will be over soon. She tries her hardest to not cry as he fusses over her, picking her up and carrying her to the bed and tucking the sheets around her, promising to get her hot water. Sydney feels a pang of envy, knowing that Cassidy would soon have this kind of love and care for herself, and all from a man that loves her with all his heart. But she knows he'll be happy, and that's enough for her. She falls asleep with that realization, seconds before Adrian comes into the room with the hot water, seeing a sad smile on his sleeping wife's face. Chapter 6. Just a reminder to everyone that this is the Friday morning of the third week, which means there's only 10 days left until he's supposed to leave her. Sydney wakes early the following morning, feeling an unfamiliar warmth surrounding her, one she hadn't felt in months. She twists around, a soft gasp falling out of her mouth as she sees a sight she hasn't seen in forever. Adrian was peacefully sleeping, his body curled towards her. Sydney smiles, her moment of peace disrupted as she feels that all too familiar feeling, bubbling up in her chest. She does everything in her power to not disturb this sight, shoving her face into the crook of her elbow, her coughs not quite muffled. She lays down, feeling as if she was loved again, even though she knows he doesn't love her. Instead, his heart was devoted to Cassidy, and their future together, one that should have belonged to Sydney instead. She again falls asleep with that realization, unaware she has only 8 days before this ends, and 11 days until the end. Adrian wakes up, and immediately spots his soon-to-be ex-wife sleeping, her face serene and relaxed. He knows he should feel guilty for sleeping in the same bed as her, as he's soon to be marrying another woman that he loves. Or so he thinks. His heart aches with the knowledge that he won't ever have his talks with his wife anymore, sitting across from the table, debating about things. Her opinions and her temper were in fact what he had fallen in love with in the first place. He frowns as he thinks about his wife. She's been different. He's noticed she'd become less outspoken, and staring at nothing, looking like she was thinking deeply about something. She'd been tired too, always looking like she's about to fall over and sleep right then and there. He also sees she eats less, just tiny little bites. Suddenly, the landline breaks him out of his thoughts. Chapter 7. Hello. Hi. May I speak to Sydney Anderson please? The first thing Adrian noticed was that, whatever thing this was, she had entered with her maiden name. He didn't know why, but that made his chest hurt, near his heart. She's currently asleep. May I take a message? Yes. Please tell her it's an emergency and she needs to get back to me as soon as possible. Tell her Matt Pedersen called. The next thing Adrian noticed was that the person asking for his wife was a man. Who are you? Adrian asked rudely. He didn't care about how he sounded to others at the moment. He just cared about finding out who the hell this man asking for his wife was. I'm your wife's doctor. I'm just calling to check in on her, making sure everything's okay with her still. She's perfectly fine. Don't call this number again. Before he hung up, he heard the doctor chuckle, then say, well, that's where you're wrong, my friend. Then the line went silent. Chapter 8. Sydney woke up to a strange sight. Her husband was rummaging through her things, reading her papers in her purse, and the prescription medication she had been taking. Luckily, he had not found the medications prescribed for her condition. She sits up, the thing now hard for her, and says, Adrian, what the hell are you doing? His head snaps up, the certain look in his eyes she couldn't quite describe. Are you okay? Are you sick? No, I'm fine, she reassured him. She sees his shoulders relax. She feels bad for lying, but she won't tell him. He needs to move on. That afternoon, Adrian goes off to work. Sydney tells him she's fine, and that she's going to stay home today. She knows he wouldn't have left if she said otherwise, so she kept quiet about her day. What? I thought I had another month. No, I'm sorry, Miss Anderson. It could happen any day now. Chapter 9. Friday evening. When Adrian arrives home, he could immediately tell something was wrong. Despite Sydney's fragile state, she was always doing things with a certain energy to her. That energy was gone. It was like someone had taken it all from her. That spark in her eyes were gone. It was dull, lifeless almost. It seemed all of the fight she had left in her body had disappeared. Okay. That was something they had always asked each other throughout high school and college. Adrian hoped she still remembered. Yeah, she responded softly as she chopped the vegetables. I'm okay. Again, that night they sleep in the same bed. Sydney lies awake, knowing she could be gone right that second. Adrian lies awake, thinking about why he hasn't visited Cassidy, or why he feels these emotions towards someone he claimed to have stopped loving. They both think the other is asleep, happy. Chapter 10. Saturday morning. No, Cassidy. I said we're done. Adrian roughly pulled his hand through his hair, tugging on it as he went. I just can't be with you anymore. I'm sorry. Sydney again wakes to Adrian, typing a message into his phone. He seemed very invested in whoever this person was. It must be Cassidy. She thought bitterly. She knew he didn't love her anymore, and had accepted it long ago. but the pain felt like the first time she had ever discovered his affair. Chapter 11. Sunday morning. Adrian. She approaches him timidly, unlike the way she used to, informally, and with confidence. "Yes, Sydney. Could we visit your beach house? I want to go there before." She cuts herself off, reminding herself he isn't supposed to know. She wants him to move in and be happy with Cassidy, not dwell on her death and wonder what would have happened if he stayed. She wanted for him whenever he thought of her, he would think of her as alive, not dead. "Yeah, we could go. But before what?" he asks curiously. He knows she's hiding something. "Nothing." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." That afternoon, as she's packing, it occurs to her that she should pack his bags for him too, so that he wouldn't have to do it when he got home. She shuts her suitcase and stands, her knees cracking. As she's about to leave the room to get his bags, a sharp pain flashes throughout her body, causing her to fall to the ground. She lays there for a second, catching her breath. She breathes in and out, trying to regulate her breathing. She's okay for now. Adrian comes home that night, already accustomed to the sounds of his wife cooking in the kitchen. As he makes his way to his room to pack, he thinks about talking to her about their possible future together. Maybe she'll forgive him. He makes his way into the room, and sees his bags neatly packed on the bed. His heart warms and beats just a tiny bit faster as he realizes she did it for him, just like she did in their early years of marriage, when they were so in love. He misses that. Chapter 12. Monday morning. As he loaded his and Sydney's things into the car, he thought about how this could potentially be the last time he would ever do this with her, his last time seeing her, his last time being with her. He never wanted that to happen. As he pulled up into the driveway, he looked at his sleeping wife. In their college years, whenever he had seen her sleep, she had a small content smile on her face. Now, she had this small, almost unnoticeable frown on her face. Was it because of him? Chapter 13. Tuesday morning. At the beach house in Florida, she felt content and happy. She had almost forgotten the reason why she had wanted so desperately to come to this place. This house held only good memories for her. This was where she and Adrian had had their honeymoon, and their happiest anniversaries were celebrated here. She would miss this place, and soon all their happiest memories here would be replaced by Cassidy. Wednesday morning. That morning, she decided to go on a jog. She put on her leggings and an Adidas hoodie. She wore a pair of Nike running shoes on her feet. "Where are you going?" Adrian spoke up from his spot on the couch. "Just for a little jog around the area." Thursday. The next morning, Adrian joined her. Chapter 14. Monday. Over the weekend, Adrian had become accustomed to waking up early and running with Sydney. So that morning, as he pulled on his shoes, he found it odd to see that she was not there silently waiting for him. He shrugged and jogged out the door. Maybe she was already gone. 30 minutes later, as he was finished the last quarter mile of his run, he wondered why he had not run into her. Maybe she was already home. 10 minutes later, he walked in the door of the luxurious beach house, expecting to see Sydney in the kitchen, making lunch. What he was met with instead was pure silence. He heard the faint noise coming from the bathroom, and he immediately started walking to the bathroom. He heard another small sound, and what sounded like a small cry of pain, then a dull thud, like a small bag of rice hitting the floor. Chapter 15. still Monday. He walks towards the door, scared. Adrian knocks on the door calling, "Sydney, are you in there?" The response comes through the door. "No, she is not in here," comes the heavily accented voice of their housekeeper. "Real? I felt okay, just wondering," he says. "Where the hell is she?" Suddenly the creak of the door opening startles him. "Sydney, is that you?" he calls. "Yeah." Her muffled reply comes from downstairs. Adrian hurries down, and seeing her face gives him a funny flutter in his stomach, and he doesn't know what island. "Where were you this morning?" he asks. "Oh, I was in the shower and I lost track of time. Sorry I missed our run. After I finished, I went out but you were gone already." That night, the night before they leave to go back home, he takes her out to an Italian restaurant in a nearby town she loves. After dinner, they take a walk around the boardwalk. It's calming, and it reminds them both of their honeymoon. They talk mindlessly about random things, and it's just like they had never drifted apart. For a blissful few seconds, Sydney forgets about her future, and Adrian forgets the world and focuses on the woman he loved most. Neither of them realize they have only 3 days left. Okay, not my best chapter, but it's more than what I usually write. So, Chapter 16. Tuesday. The morning before they're supposed to leave, Adrian wakes up early, as usual, and gets ready for their run. However, this time, he walked over to the bathroom, to see if Sydney is showering still. As he nears the bathroom, he doesn't hear a sound. He checks to make sure. "Sydney, are you in there?" His reply comes in the form of a short and raspy cough. "Are you okay?" When he gets no response, he bangs on the door, his heart starting to speed up. "Sydney, Sydney, talk to me." Again, he gets no response. He draws a deep breath in, preparing himself. He tenses his body and kicks powerfully, the door splintering. What he sees will be engraved in his mind forever. "Hi. Sorry I haven't updated. I've been busy. And by busy, I mean, I've been procrastinating. Sorry." Chapter 17. Tuesday. Recap. He tenses his body and kicks powerfully, the door splintering. What he sees will be engraved in his mind forever. Sydney is lying on the floor around her drenched in her ruby red blood. Adrian panics and kneels on the floor, not caring about whether or not her blood gets on his skin. He shakes her, his hands trembling. "Sydney, Sydney, please, answer me." She ever so slightly lifts her head up, coughing up more blood. It spills onto her clothing. "Adrian," she rasps, her voice so soft, Adrian had to lean closer to hear her. "I'm sorry," she's cut off by another cough. Even more of the red liquid comes, covering her face. "Shh, baby, it's okay. You don't have to talk. I'm calling 911 right now." Adrian picks his phone up, and dialing 911. 911, "What's your emergency?" The brisk voice of the operator comes through the speaker. "My wife is coughing up blood. I need you to come now." He rattles off the address to their beach house and hangs up, dropping his phone onto the floor. He sits by Sydney, cradling her body in his arms. "Talk to me until the ambulance comes, please. I need—" He cuts himself off. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I never told you," she cries. He shakes her. "Sorry about what? Tell me. Tell me." His voice rises in volume in a desperate attempt to keep her with him, to keep on talking. She opens her mouth, then falls unconscious, her head rolling back. "Sydney! Sydney! Sydney!" he screams, his voice breaking. "No, no, 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 baby, please wake up, please by now." Fat tears are rolling down his face, dripping onto the hard marble floor now covered in blood. His white shirt is stained by his wife's blood. He cries and screams until the ambulance comes. He's numb to everything, barely noticing what the medics tell him to do. They load her into the back, them driving off, sirens glaring, him sitting beside her, clutching her hand. Chapter 18. Tuesday. He sits in the waiting room, pacing back and forth. His hair is tousled, strands standing up, facing the ceiling due to him running his fingers through his hair over and over in worry. He blames himself. If he had never taken her to their beach house, she would have gotten to the hospital faster. The only thing he could hope for now was for her life, and the future he wanted more than anything. She's in the dark. She doesn't know what's going on. She only remembers that horrible pain, and Adrian. Oh God, what happened to Adrian? He must be worried. In her mind, she scoffs. As if he's probably having the time of his life with Cassidy. As she thinks this, she hears the incessant beeping sound. Beep. 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 She doesn't know what it is, so she sinks back into that deep, black darkness she's in. As she does, she hears a voice, distinctly yelling. "Clear! We're losing her." She doesn't know what that means, or what anything means anymore, so she sinks down, 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 into the comforting blackness, which envelopes her like a soft blanket. Damn, this is turning into a hot mess. My writing style changed again. LMAO. I also have no idea what kind of sickness she has anymore. Originally, it was lung cancer, but now I honestly don't know what's happening with her, or if lung cancer could cause them to have to charge her with electrical shocks. I didn't listen in school, so. Chapter 19. He jerks his head up from his hands when he sees the doors to her room swing open, the doctor in the telltale green scrubs stepping out, pulling his latex gloves off of his hands. Adrian sees the doctor rub his face roughly with his hands. Adrian's heartbeat quickens, knowing there was bad news. "Adrian Taylor?" the doctor calls. "Yes, that's me," Adrian says firmly, trying to seem as if he wasn't dying on the inside, as if he were completely okay. "Your wife?" the doctor says. "Is she okay?" Adrian asks, abandoning his dignity for this woman, the woman he valued more than his life. "Please, tell me she's okay, or if she's alive even," he begs. But he knows, in his heart, she will never be okay. "She's alive," the doctor begins. Adrian almost sobs with relief. "But, she's barely hanging in there. She, at most, only has about a week left." And his heart breaks, shattering to the ground into pieces. Chapter 20. Adrian wakes up from his spot curled on the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, to the rough and calloused hand of the doctor shaking him awake. For a brief second, he was deliriously happy, thinking he was back at the beach house, waking up to his perfectly healthy wife. Then it all crashed, Adrian realizing he was still in the hospital room, with his wife in another, with only 1 week left to live. He looks up at the doctor, waiting for him to speak. "Your wife, she's awake now. You can visit her now. Room 110. The second he hears she's awake, he's up, barely catching the last words. He sprints down the hallway, shouting a thank you over his shoulder. Adrian whips his head side to side, looking for the room with the number 110 printed in bold black lettering. He stops in front of said room. Without giving himself time to catch his breath, he yanks the door open, stopping when he sees Sydney, lying in the pure white bed. She's almost as pale as the bed itself, and that scared him. They make eye contact, and without any verbal words spoken, he brings himself to the side of her bed, falling to the ground and clutching her hand. He buries his face in the sheets of the hospital bed, sobbing. Faintly, he can hear the sound of the door being closed by the nurse. The two of them sit in silence, him crying, and her rubbing his head. Adrian and Sydney, the way it's always been. Chapter 21. Adrian didn't know how long he had been sitting there. It could have been hours, or seconds, and he wouldn't have given a damn. He looked up to realize Sydney was also crying. "I'm sorry," she cries. "I'm sorry." He stands up, wincing at the stretch in his legs. Adrian steps closer to her bed. He strokes her hair, calming her before asking, "What are you sorry about?" "I'm sorry for not being a good enough wife for you. I'm sorry for never telling you. I'm sorry for never trying harder for you. I'm sorry for never giving you the life you wanted. I'm sorry for never looking like your other girls. I'm sorry." She breaks off into sobs, her body shaking. Every sentence, every word, broke his heart. She thought she wasn't good enough. He holds her close, trying to make her feel wanted and loved, although he had done a bad job of that in the past, and breaking her in the process. "Hey, so I'm back. Kinda sad and my boyfriend left for college. And my brother is on a trip with his friends. Also, I have a question. Would you rather I write another story about a story, kinda mix-up of 13 RW and paper towns? Or be just another random story like this one?" Chapter 22. That night, in the white hospital room, Adrian made sure to hold her hand, and to hold it tight, because he needed her. He needed her like air. As they slept, Adrian had this heavy feeling in his stomach. He knew her time was coming, and coming soon. Sydney felt loved. She felt so amazing, even though she was dying. She could feel it, from her head to her toes. Her husband's hands held hers tight, their grip never faltering. With every second, she felt herself falling in love all over again. With the machines whirring in the background, Sydney and Adrian slept, their hands holding each other's, and their breaths in sync. Anyone could see they were made for each other, every bit of their personalities and looks perfectly complementing the other. That very night, they had their last few moments of peace together, and before he sleeps, he whispers, "I'll never leave you. I'll be right here." Chapter 23. The second Adrian wakes up, he knows. He can feel it. Her hand is cold and limp in his, and her chest is still. Doctors rush in, shouting. A nurse spots him, and ushers him out. But he won't. He fights and shouts and screams, tears running down his face. He doesn't care about how he looks, he just cares about being there. He made the promise, and he didn't want to break it. The nurses drag him out saying, "You can't help him there." Or, "Sir, please calm down." He watches through the window. He sees the looks on the doctors' faces, and that's when he knows. He won't ever get to see her smile, hear her laugh, or even smell her familiar scent ever again. He won't get to have the life he wanted with her. He would never get kids with her perfect blue eyes, his blonde hair, and her dimples and smile. He wanted a family, a perfect marriage with only her. From that moment, he promises himself one thing: he would only love her, and no one else. Chapter 24. At her funeral, Adrian is numb, watching other people come up to her coffin and touch it, whispering words to her he knew she would have loved. Countless people went up to him, offering their condolences, and saying things such as, "I am so sorry," or "She loved you so much." It was the same thing every time. When the funeral starts, many people went up to talk, saying almost the exact same thing: "She was the most caring and genuine person I have ever met." When it was his turn, he had to take a moment to keep from crying. Sydney was, no, is, the love of my life. From the moment I met her in high school, I knew we were gonna be together for the rest of our lives. I had no idea she was leaving this soon. She never told me, although I will admit it was mostly my fault. I distanced myself from her, and that will be a decision I will regret for the rest of my life. Our relationship was filled with ups and downs, and I'm so happy I got to spend all the time I could with her. She was my one blessing. I know she would have loved to see you all here. She loved her family, her friends, and—" He broke off, the memories being too painful for him. After the funeral he rushes out to his car, leaving before anyone else did. However, her lawyer finds him and shoves an envelope into his hands, before offering his condolences and then saying, "She asked me to give this to you." Adrian drives home, wondering what was in that envelope. When he gets home, he opens it, and inside is a letter, addressed to him. Chapter 25. The bold, italicized, underlined text at the bottom is a must-read. Please read. ID is important and concerns the epilogue and possible other chapters of this story. Thank you. Adrian unfolds her letter with shaking hands. Dear Adrian, from the moment I met you, I knew we were going to spend the rest of our lifetimes together. I didn't expect mine to end so soon. I'm sorry I never told you about my condition. In the months before our month, you never cared about me. You weren't there for me when my mother died. You weren't there for me in the months after we lost our child either. I needed you, Adrian. You weren't there. You buried yourself, drinking, until eventually, you met Cassidy. Although you never noticed me, but in the few hours we spent with each other every night, I noticed a difference. You were happier. I didn't want to ruin that, so I never told you. Maybe you're thinking you could have fixed this. You couldn't, Adrian. By then, I was ready to die. I lost our child, I lost my mother, and then I lost you, in a way. Here, Adrian could see where her tears had fallen, and his too, were dripping down onto the crisp white paper, smearing the ink. I was ready. I asked for the last month, because I wanted you to carry on a good image of me after our divorce. I was supposed to die in the following month after our month, but the date got pushed up. You were never supposed to find out. I remember, in high school, my grandmother passed away. You skipped school for me, comforting me. You gave me a sense of security no one else could give me. You never left me, until now. I still remember your vows too. I, Adrian Taylor, promise to love you forever, to be with you through every event, good or bad. I vow to cherish you, in sickness or health. You will always be by my side. I love you. I'm sure you meant it at the time. I'm sorry I left you. I love you, I love you, I love you, and I'll be watching you from above, cheering you on through every bad or good decision. Thank you for giving me everything you did, and for the last month you gave me. I love you so very much, and I hope you never forget that. With all my love and more, Sydney. After he finishes reading the very last sentence, he breaks all over again, his heart crumbling in pieces to the ground. He shatters, his body shaking with heavy sobs. That night, as he climbs into bed, alone, he looks at the stars. He can barely spot Sydney's favorite constellation, Perseus. Pain wells up in his body. He feels around the bed, hoping to find the source of comfort. He notices that the right side of the bed was empty. It's cold and lonely. He feels guilty, knowing that this was what Sydney had endured for months while he was warming another woman's bed. Adrian grabs her pillow, hugging it close and breathing in the scent of her shampoo, coconut and lavender. He held it tight, not letting go. He broke his vows, and this was how the world was punishing him. Epilogue. 2 years later. In the busy streets of New York, a man, in his late 30s hurries through the streets, hunching his shoulders to avoid the rain. He hurries into the small community center that was currently the meeting spot for his charity he had started with the money his late wife had left behind for him. Adrian walks into the room, shaking his hair to rid it of any excess water. He looks around the room. He was early, seeing as no one was there. He sits behind the desk given to him, shuffles a few papers from his business that he needed to finish. Adrian sighs and sets his head down, gazing at the framed picture of his wife. She was so beautiful. In the picture, her blue eyes sparkled as she wrapped herself around him, his head thrown back in laughter. She wore the biggest smile, one that he would never forget. This was during their honeymoon in Hawaii. He remembers all their good and bad times, her laugh, her smile, and her voice. He loved her with all of him, and will continue so until his last breath. He had promised himself he would honor her memory until his last breath, when he would finally be happy, because he got to see her again. Ending chapter. High school, when they meet. As Maria, her student guide, drags her around in the hallways of Lincoln High School, she blabbers on about the various social groups and people of the school. See that girl there? In the awful red sweater? Yeah, her. That's Vicky, the snubbiest nerd, BXTCH you'll meet here. If you hang with her crowd, your social status will drop faster than you can blink. Sydney's head spins as she tries to take in Mari's fast speaking. Suddenly, a certain guy catches her attention. He was surrounded by a large group of guys, all wearing almost the exact same thing, the blue and white football jersey, with various numbers on the back, with a pair of blue jeans. She notices cheerleaders walking around in uniforms, all blue and white. There were streamers hung up on the walls, and a huge banner that read, "Go Patriots." Sydney assumes it must have been game day or something like that. Maria notices where her gaze is directed, and squeals. Okay, so that's like the popular football guys. They're all super hot, but number 17, you see him? Yeah. That's Adrian Taylor. He's the quarterback and he's like super hot and a total man-ho. Sydney notices him watching her, feeling his gaze brush over her. She feels terribly vulnerable. Suddenly, she sees him say something to his friends, then he starts to walk over to her. Maria squeals again. OMG, he's coming over here. Do I look okay? Do my boobs look good in this top? Is my hair messy?" Mario continues on, but all sound fades away when Sydney looks into his eyes from a distance. She's captivated, under his spell. His eyes were the brightest blue, piercing into her soft brown ones. The end.